When did you put a Nepo baby in their place? I was sitting in the courthouse bathroom stall when I heard two lawyers walk in laughing about how easy it was to get the mayor's son off with community service for killing my brother while driving drunk. One joked that money really could buy anything, including a judge's sympathy. I stayed silent until they left, then stumbled out feeling hollow. The mayor's son, Sawyer, had mowed down my little brother at a crosswalk 6 months earlier. He fled the scene, leaving my brother to die alone on the asphalt. Security footage showed his car speeding, but somehow the evidence kept getting muddled during the trial. His high-powered lawyers painted him as a troubled youth who made one mistake. After the joke of a sentencing, I watched Mayor Dorsey give a press conference about second chances and redemption. He stood there talking about how his family suffered too, while behind him Sawyer smirked, wearing designer sunglasses indoors. Nobody wanted to hear that this wasn't Sawyer's first offense. I'd done research and found sealed records of previous incidents. A DUI that disappeared, an assault charge that got dropped, property damage that his father paid off quietly. But every time I tried to bring it up, people said I was bitter and needed to move on. 3 months after the trial, I was working at my crappy retail job when a manila envelope appeared under my car windshield. No return address or note, just a USB drive wrapped in bubble wrap. I plugged it into my laptop, and the drive contained dozens of photos and documents about a 3-year-old girl named Jade, birth certificate listing Sawyer Dorsey as the father, alongside hospital records, bank statements showing monthly payments from an offshore account, and photos of Sawyer with a young woman and baby. I dug deeper and found the mother's story. She'd been a college student when Sawyer got her pregnant. His family paid her to disappear and stay quiet. The monthly payments came with strict conditions, including never contacting Sawyer or going public. She'd moved 3 states away and was raising Jade alone. This was bigger than just a drunk driving cover-up. This was proof of a pattern showing how the Dorsey family handled problems by throwing money at them. I finally had leverage but needed to be smart about using it. Going to the media would put Jade and her mother at risk. I spent weeks verifying everything, even driving out of state to observe them from afar. Jade had Sawyer's distinctive green eyes and sharp chin. Watching her play at a park while her mother looked exhausted broke my heart. The anonymous source kept feeding me information through random drops. Security footage of Sawyer visiting the child exactly once when she was born. Legal documents showing the non-disclosure agreements. Even recordings of phone calls where lawyers discussed keeping the situation contained. Someone close to the family wanted this exposed, but couldn't do it themselves. I decided to confront Sawyer directly first. I waited outside his favorite bar until he stumbled out at 2 a.m., heading for his car again. I stepped in front of him, holding printed photos of Jade. His drunk confidence evaporated as he recognized what I had. He tried to grab the papers, but I'd made copies. Sawyer called his father right there in the parking lot, babbling about the photos. I could hear Mayor Dorsey's voice getting louder through the phone, demanding to know who else knew. Sawyer kept looking at me with genuine fear in his eyes. He knew I had something that money couldn't make disappear. The next day, Mayor Dorsey himself showed up at my apartment with 2 lawyers. They tried every tactic from bribes to threats to emotional manipulation. They offered me millions to hand over the files and sign my own NDA. When I refused, they shifted to talking about how publicizing this would hurt Jade and her mother more than anyone else. I told them I wanted justice for my brother, not money. The mayor's face went cold, and he said justice was a luxury people like me couldn't afford. He promised to destroy my life if I went public. His lawyers already had a strategy to discredit me as a grieving brother making up conspiracies. They left me with 1 week to reconsider. That night, I sat staring at Jade's photos, wondering what my brother would want me to do. The weight of that choice was crushing me. 6 days later, I was meeting with a journalist when my phone buzzed with an emergency alert. Mayor Dorsey was holding a surprise press conference. I turned on the stream and watched him approach the podium with tears in his eyes. He announced he'd just learned about a grandchild he never knew existed and would be taking time off to meet her. The mayor spun the story beautifully, claiming Sawyer had hidden the child from the family out of shame. He painted himself as a victim. Grandfather denied precious years with his granddaughter. Behind him, Sawyer stood frozen while lawyers whispered urgently. The press ate it up already, crafting headlines about family reconciliation and forgiveness. I realized then that someone else had been playing a longer game. The anonymous source hadn't been helping me get justice. They'd been using me to position pieces for their own move. As cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions, I saw her step out from behind the press pool. Jade's mother walked straight up to the microphone, holding her daughter's hand. She looked directly at Mayor Dorsey with a smile that made him step backward. The lawyers were frantically making phone calls, but it was too late. She leaned into the microphone and spoke 7 words that changed everything. Actually, Mayor Dorsey, Jade is your daughter too. The whole room went crazy with reporters jumping up and shouting questions, while cameras clicked like machine guns, all pointed at Jade's mother, who stood there calm as could be holding her little girl's hand. Mayor Dorsey's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, and his face went from red to white in about 2 seconds, while behind him Sawyer looked like someone had hit him with a brick. The lawyers were speed dialing on their phones and whispering to each other, trying to figure out what to do about this bomb that just went off. Security guards started moving toward Jade's mother, but she stepped closer to the microphone and pulled out a folder from her bag saying she had DNA tests proving everything plus photos from 3 years ago when the mayor and her were together. The mayor's press secretary tried cutting the live feed, but reporters were already streaming on their phones to thousands of viewers, and nothing could stop it now. I stood there frozen, realizing the anonymous source had planned this whole thing, using me to set up the perfect moment for maximum damage. Jade's mother kept talking about dates and places, while the mayor's team scrambled around like ants after you kick their hill. Lorelei Thorne grabbed my arm hard and pulled me toward a side door as the crowd pushed forward trying to get closer to the action. She leaned close, saying we needed to get somewhere safe fast and figure out what to do next, because this was bigger than either of us expected. Her eyes showed she knew we'd both been played, but there was still a huge story here if we could stay ahead of it. My phone buzzed with an encrypted message, and when I opened it, there were screenshots of City Hall calendars showing monthly meetings labeled Legacy Review, which had to be about the hush money payments. The timestamps showed someone high up in the mayor's office had been feeding me information all along, and I forwarded everything to Lorelei as we ducked into a coffee shop 2 blocks away. We sat in the back corner and she started making notes while I tried to process what just happened. Within an hour, a courier walked right up to our table and handed me an envelope with a cease and desist letter from the mayor's lawyers, threatening to sue me for defamation if I shared any more information. My hands shook reading it because they'd tracked us here already, which meant they had people watching me. The letter listed all kinds of legal threats about destroying my life if I didn't hand over everything and stay quiet. Lorelei took photos of the letter and said we needed a lawyer immediately because this was going to get ugly fast. My phone lit up with a text from an unknown number that turned out to be Jade's mother asking to meet because she wanted to control her own story and not be anyone's pawn. She wrote that she knew about my brother and had picked this exact moment to cause maximum damage to the mayor who'd controlled her life for 3 years. I texted back agreeing to meet wherever she felt safe because she deserved to tell her truth however she wanted. The next morning, I woke up on Hudson's couch to see every news channel running the story, but the mayor's team was already spinning it as a misunderstanding that needed investigation. Mayor Dorsey released a statement saying he was taking leave to focus on family matters and look into these troubling allegations, which was code for damage control. The PR machine was working overtime with paid experts on TV, saying we should wait for facts before jumping to conclusions. My phone started ringing nonstop with unknown numbers, and when I checked social media, someone had posted my address and workplace with messages calling me a liar trying to destroy a good family. The threats ranged from legal action to physical violence, and people were sharing my photo saying I was a bitter conspiracy theorist. I packed a bag fast, and Hudson said I could stay as long as I needed while we figured out next steps. Lorelei called saying she'd found a media lawyer willing to help us pro bono because she believed in holding powerful people accountable. We met the lawyer at her office where she laid out exactly what we could and couldn't say without getting sued into oblivion. She had sharp eyes and gray hair and explained that truth was our only defense, but we needed rock-solid proof for everything we claimed. The lawyer went through each piece of evidence, marking what was usable and what would get us in trouble. That night, Hudson helped me set up better digital security while I backed up everything to multiple cloud accounts and physical drives that I hid in different places. I made copies of copies because I knew they'd try to destroy evidence or claim I'd faked it all. Hudson made sure I ate something while I worked because I'd been running on adrenaline and coffee for 2 days straight. The paranoia felt completely justified considering the mayor had already tracked me once and his lawyers were preparing to destroy my life through the courts. The next morning, another envelope showed up taped to Hudson's door with no return address. Inside were pages of police evidence logs from my brother's case with weird gaps in the chain of custody. The blood test kit had been checked out 3 times after the lab already processed it. Someone had gone back and messed with the evidence after the fact. The timestamps showed it happened right before the trial when the prosecutor suddenly said the readings weren't reliable. My hands shook as I read through each page, seeing how they'd rigged the whole thing from the start. I tried calling the cop who first responded to my brother's accident, but his voicemail stayed full no matter when I called. Hudson drove me to the police station where the desk sergeant said Officer Marquez was on extended leave with no return date. The other cops wouldn't look me in the eye when I asked about him. Something was really wrong with how they handled my brother's case, and everyone knew it. That afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from Jade's mother saying she had something important to share. She sent me lab results showing DNA testing between Mayor Dorsey and Jade with a 99.9% match as father and daughter. Not grandfather like he claimed at the press conference, but actual biological father. She included old photos from campaign events where she stood next to the mayor looking young and happy before everything went bad. The truth was way worse than just covering for his son because the mayor had gotten a teenager pregnant, then paid her to blame Sawyer instead. My phone rang while I was still processing the DNA results, and my retail manager's name popped up. He sounded uncomfortable as he told me my hours were being cut to almost nothing because of customer complaints. I hadn't even been to work in 3 days, so there couldn't be real complaints. He kept apologizing, but we both knew someone made him do this. The Dorsey family was attacking my income now to make me desperate enough to back off. I needed legal help, so Hudson set up a meeting with Sebastian Rubin, who worked as an assistant DA downtown. Sebastian listened to everything I had but kept writing notes without making eye contact. He finally looked up and explained he needed rock-solid evidence before taking on the mayor's office. The political pressure would be huge, and one mistake could end his career. I understood his caution, but wanted him to move faster while we had momentum. That night, I spread everything across Hudson's kitchen table and started building a timeline on poster board. The drunk driving cover-up connected to the evidence tampering, which linked to the NDAS and hush money payments. The paternity lie sat at the center with arrows pointing to every other crime they committed to hide it. Looking at the whole web made me realize how deep this corruption went through every level of city government. Meanwhile, Lorelai was meeting with her editor trying to get approval for the story, but he kept pushing back. She texted me that he wanted signed affidavits and multiple sources for every single claim we made. Journalism wasn't about breaking news anymore, but about being bulletproof when rich people's lawyers came after you. The editor finally agreed to run something if they could verify everything to his standards, which meant more waiting. Lorelai arranged a formal interview with Jade's mother at a lawyer's office, where everyone would have legal protection. The mother showed up looking calm and ready to finally tell her story the right way. Lorelai treated her with respect, which helped build trust between them after years of the mother being treated like a problem to manage. They sat in a conference room with a court reporter typing every word while lawyers watched from the corners. The mother started by explaining she was 19 and volunteering for Mayor Dorsey's first campaign when he started paying attention to her. She described how he pursued her with gifts and promises until she thought they were in love. The affair lasted 3 months before she found out she was pregnant, and everything changed. The mayor's lawyers showed up at her dorm with papers to sign and threats about what would happen if she didn't cooperate. They made her name Sawyer as the father to protect the mayor's marriage and political career. She got monthly payments but had to disappear and never contact anyone from her old life again. For years, she followed their rules while raising Jade alone and watching the mayor on TV pretending to be this great family man. She knew about the press conference ahead of time because someone at City Hall always leaked the mayor's schedule. She planned her revelation for maximum impact when he tried to spin being a grandfather. The mother wanted Jade to know the truth someday, instead of growing up with lies about who her father really was. She looked straight at the camera and said she was done being afraid of what they could do to her. That same night, I drove to the old parking garage on 5th Street, where the anonymous source had left packages before. The third level was empty, except for scattered trash and a few abandoned shopping carts. I taped an envelope under the concrete ledge near the stairwell where I'd found previous drops. Inside was a simple message saying I was done being someone's puppet and wouldn't cooperate anymore unless they revealed themselves. Trust had to work both ways if we were going to bring down the mayor together. I waited in my car for 20 minutes watching the drop spot, but nobody showed up. Back at Hudson's apartment, I couldn't sleep thinking about who might be pulling the strings behind everything. The next morning, Hudson woke me up holding a package that had been left on his doorstep while we slept. Inside was an internal City Hall memo about something called Legacy Risk Management, with Nathan Sterling's signature at the bottom. Sterling was the mayor's chief of staff and had worked for him for 15 years. The memo detailed protocols for handling sensitive family matters that could impact political standing. Everything suddenly made sense about who'd been feeding me information from inside the mayor's office. Sterling was trying to destroy his boss while keeping his own hands clean. I called Lorelai immediately, and she came over with her laptop to examine the document. She ran the memo through some software that pulled metadata from the file, showing it originated from Sterling's official computer. The email headers matched City Hall's internal server, and the digital signature was authentic. We had actual proof that someone at the highest level of the mayor's staff was documenting the corruption. Lorelai started building a timeline comparing when Sterling sent memos versus when I received leaks. The pattern showed he'd been planning this for months before my brother died. Another package arrived that afternoon, containing a draft of Sterling's resignation letter that he'd never sent. The letter talked about struggling with the ethical weight of enabling the mayor's crimes for years. He wrote about protecting the city from personal scandals and trying to minimize damage to innocent people. His words showed someone desperate to see himself as the good guy, despite everything he'd helped cover up. Reading between the lines, I could see Sterling's guilt eating at him. That's when I understood that Sterling and Jade's mother had acted completely independently at the press conference. Neither one knew about the other's plans, which explained why everything turned so chaotic. The mayor was getting hit from multiple angles he never saw coming. Sterling thought he was orchestrating a controlled demolition, while Jade's mother just wanted the truth out. Their separate attacks accidentally created something bigger than either planned. My friend who worked in digital forensics came over that evening to help secure all our evidence properly. He brought special equipment to create hash values for every file proving they hadn't been altered. We documented everything with timestamps and created multiple backup copies stored in different locations. He showed me how to maintain a proper chain of custody that would hold up in court. Every piece of evidence got logged with witness signatures and security protocols. If this went to trial, our documentation would be bulletproof against any legal challenges. Meanwhile, Lorelai was dealing with pressure from her newspaper's legal team about the story. They kept editing her draft to remove anything that could be seen as opinion rather than fact. She had to rewrite sections multiple times to satisfy their requirements for objectivity. The lawyers wanted every single claim backed up with documents and multiple sources. She told me later that she understood they were protecting everyone from defamation lawsuits, but it was frustrating. The legal team cut paragraphs that contained important context because they couldn't be proven definitively. 2 days later, Lorelai arranged another meeting with Jade's mother at a law office downtown. The mother agreed to sign a sworn affidavit detailing everything that had happened to her. She sat at the conference table, calmly recounting dates and specific conversations with the mayor's lawyers. The affidavit included information about payments, threats, and the pressure to name Sawyer as the father. Her lawyer reviewed every line to make sure the language was precise and legally sound. Once signed and notarized, the document would be sealed until needed for legal proceedings. Having her testimony officially documented felt like a major step forward in building our case. That same week, I met with Sebastian Rubin at his office in the district attorney's building. He'd been reviewing everything I'd sent him and decided to open a formal inquiry. His focus would be specifically on evidence tampering in my brother's drunk driving case. He explained that starting with one specific crime gave him legal standing to investigate further. His careful approach might actually work where my angry demands had failed. Sebastian showed me the paperwork he was filing to request chain of custody logs from the police department. The formal legal request included a confidentiality notice to prevent anyone from alerting the mayor's team. He said the department couldn't ignore an official request from the DA's office like they had my phone calls. The system was finally responding because we were using proper procedures instead of emotional appeals. 3 days later, Sterling was sitting at his desk when his assistant knocked and said the IT department needed his approval for some routine maintenance. He signed without reading closely, but the tech guy lingered and mentioned something about a legal hold on all city emails related to the mayor's family. Sterling's face went white, and he grabbed his phone, scrolling through his calendar app and deleting entries about those legacy review meetings. He opened his email and started selecting messages to purge, but when he hit delete, a warning popped up saying these items were subject to legal preservation requirements. The IT guy was still standing there, watching him try to destroy evidence. Sterling told him to override the system, but the tech shook his head and said he'd have to report any attempts to bypass the legal hold to the city attorney's office. Sterling slammed his laptop shut and told the guy to get out, but it was too late because the system had already logged every deletion attempt with timestamps and his user ID. The next morning, I was eating cereal at Hudson's apartment when someone knocked hard on the door. Hudson looked through the peephole and saw 2 guys in suits holding clipboards. They were process servers with a thick envelope addressed to me containing a pre-litigation demand letter from the mayor's legal team. The document ordered me to preserve all materials, communications, emails, texts, social media posts, physical documents, recordings, and any other evidence related to the Dorsey family. It warned that destroying anything could result in criminal charges for obstruction of justice. Hudson read over my shoulder and laughed, saying I was becoming quite the legal expert with all these official documents piling up. The letter gave me 72 hours to confirm in writing that I'd comply with the preservation order. I spent that afternoon going through everything I had and making a detailed list of every threat I'd received since this started. There were the anonymous phone calls at all hours with breathing and hang-ups, the emails to my work address calling me a liar and saying I'd regret messing with powerful people, screenshots of social media posts where strangers posted my photo and home address, text messages from unknown numbers describing what would happen if I didn't back off, photos of my brother's grave with "You're next" written in the dirt. I organized everything chronologically and made copies to send Sebastian and Lorelei because if they wanted to play legal hardball, I'd show them a clear pattern of witness intimidation. My records were becoming weapons in this fight. Meanwhile, Sebastian was interviewing the evidence clerk who'd handled the blood samples and paperwork from my brother's case. She sat across from him in the small interview room, fidgeting with her coffee cup. She mentioned how her supervisor had called her multiple times about that particular case, asking about chain of custody forms and testing timelines. She said it was unusual because supervisors rarely got involved in routine DUI evidence processing. Sebastian asked if she'd noticed anything else strange, and she hesitated before saying the evidence had been marked for expedited processing, even though there was no rush order in the file. She wanted to say more, but kept glancing at the door nervously. Sebastian told her about whistleblower protections and possible immunity if she cooperated fully. She said she needed to think about it and talk to a lawyer first, but the cracks in their wall were starting to show. That same week, Child Protective Services assigned Ariana Santos to evaluate Jade's living situation, given all the media attention around her parentage. Ariana had 20 years of experience and a reputation for being thorough but fair. She called Jade's mother directly to schedule the assessment, explaining it was routine when children were involved in high-profile cases. Her focus was purely on Jade's well-being, not the political drama swirling around the family. She didn't care about mayors or cover-ups, just whether a 3-year-old was safe and properly cared for. Ariana scheduled the home visit for the following Tuesday and told Jade's mother she could have her lawyer present if it made her more comfortable. She explained she'd need to see where Jade slept, check the food situation, observe mother-child interactions, and review medical records showing Jade was up to date on checkups and vaccinations. The mother agreed immediately, saying she had nothing to hide and wanted to prove she was a good parent despite everything else happening. She sounded relieved that someone official was finally focusing on what mattered most. During this time, Lorelei was digging into the actual language of those NDAs the Dorsey family had been using to silence people. She had a friend who taught contract law review the documents off the record. He pointed out several clauses that courts typically ruled unenforceable, especially when they involved concealing potential criminal activity. The payments to Jade's mother came with restrictions about discussing anything related to the Dorsey family, but legally you couldn't enforce a contract that required someone to hide evidence of crimes. Lorelai carefully explained to Jade's mother that she might already be free to speak without facing financial penalties. The lawyer confirmed that any lawsuit trying to enforce those NDAs would likely fail in court. Hope started building that we could actually win through proper legal channels instead of just trading accusations in the media. We arranged to meet at a neutral location, a conference room at Lorelai's lawyer's office, to coordinate our approach going forward. Jade's mother brought her attorney, and I brought Hudson for moral support. We spent 2 hours going through everything, laying out documents and timelines on the big table. Everyone agreed the paternity revelation needed to come out first, since it was already partially public, and we had rock-solid DNA evidence. The corruption and cover-up evidence would follow once Sebastian's investigation provided official confirmation. We all wanted the truth exposed, but it had to be done correctly to protect Jade from becoming collateral damage. Late that night, Sterling sat alone in his office with his resignation letter printed and sitting in his desk drawer. He'd written and rewritten it 5 times, trying to find the right words to explain why he was leaving without admitting to anything illegal. He pulled it out and read it again, talking about pursuing other opportunities and spending more time with family. His loyalty to the institution he'd served for 15 years was fighting against his disgust at what that institution had become under the current leadership. He folded the letter and put it back in the drawer, not quite ready to take that final step. The next morning, Sebastian's investigator called with a breakthrough because they'd received phone records through a subpoena showing Mayor Dorsey's personal lawyer had called the evidence clerk 14 times in the 2 weeks before my brother's trial. The calls created a clear timeline with several happening right before key evidence got reclassified or expedited through testing. One call lasted 43 minutes on the same day the blood alcohol results were processed. Another came an hour before the security footage was deemed partially corrupted and inadmissible. Sebastian knew he was building a real case now with documented proof of interference in the justice system. The next afternoon, Ariana showed up at Jade's mother's apartment with a clipboard and a warm smile that actually seemed real. She spent 2 hours watching Jade play with her toys while asking the mother basic questions about their daily routine and checking the apartment for safety concerns. The place was small but spotless, with kid drawings stuck on every wall and healthy food in the fridge. Jade seemed happy and kept bringing Ariana different stuffed animals to meet while her mother answered questions about doctor visits and preschool plans. When Ariana finished her inspection, she sat down with the mother and explained she was recommending a protective order that would prevent any contact with the Dorsey family without court supervision. The mother's eyes filled with tears as she signed the paperwork, knowing her daughter would finally have legal protection from the people who'd tried to buy their silence. Jade played with blocks in the corner, completely unaware that adults were fighting over her future. Before leaving, Ariana gave the mother her direct number and promised to check in regularly. That same day, the mayor's legal team filed an emergency motion with the court trying to block any publication about Jade's paternity, claiming it would harm a minor and violate privacy rights. The motion was thick as a phone book with dozens of legal arguments about defamation and emotional distress. The judge scheduled an expedited hearing for the following week, which meant everyone had to scramble to find lawyers and prepare arguments. Lorelai's newspaper brought in their whole legal department, while I started looking for someone who'd take my case without a huge retainer. Hudson helped me search online for lawyers who handled free speech cases, and we found a few willing to meet. Meanwhile, my phone rang, and it was my manager telling me my position at the store was eliminated due to restructuring. He sounded uncomfortable as he explained they were streamlining operations, even though I'd seen them posting my exact job online yesterday. I drove to the store and cleaned out my locker while he avoided making eye contact and kept saying it wasn't personal, just business decisions from corporate. The security guard watched me pack my stuff like I might steal something after working there for 2 years. On my way out, I saw they'd already printed new schedules with someone else covering all my shifts. That evening, Sterling leaked a carefully worded statement to a friendly reporter, admitting NDAS existed between the Dorsey family and certain individuals, but claiming they were for privacy, not concealment. His half-measure statement satisfied nobody, but it put the existence of the NDAS into the public record, which meant journalists could dig deeper. He was clearly trying to position himself as someone who'd been misled, rather than someone actively involved in the cover-up. Late that night, Sawyer got pulled over on 5th Street after swerving across lanes, and the officer's body cam caught everything. The footage showed him stumbling out of his car, barely able to stand, and slurring his words as he tried to explain he was just tired. The officer recognized him, and instead of administering a breathalyzer test, he let Sawyer call someone to pick him up. The whole stop took 20 minutes with Sawyer sitting on the curb, while the officer made small talk about football. I filed a public records request for the footage the very next morning, and thanks to Sebastian pulling strings behind the scenes, I got the unedited video within 3 days instead of the usual weeks. The timestamp showed this happened the same night his father was doing interviews claiming the family was suffering too and asking for privacy. Watching Sawyer laugh and joke with the officer while my brother was dead made my hands shake with rage. A junior cop reached out to Sebastian through a mutual friend and explained that supervisors had shown unusual interest in that traffic stop, asking about the footage and whether proper procedures were followed. The cop wouldn't testify without protection, but confirmed this was part of a pattern where Sawyer's encounters with law enforcement got special handling. More threads connecting to show how deep the corruption went. The hearing day arrived, and the courtroom was packed with reporters and lawyers. The judge listened to arguments from both sides, with the mayor's team claiming publication would cause irreparable harm to an innocent child. Lorelei's lawyers argued the public had a right to know about corruption and abuse of power. After 2 hours of legal arguments, the judge made a split decision, allowing the paternity story to run, since it was already partially public, but reserving judgment on the corruption allegations pending further review. It wasn't a complete victory, but it meant the first article could publish. Sterling was getting more desperate as evidence mounted, and finally agreed to confirm the calendar purging attempts to Lorelei as long as she kept him as a background source. He admitted trying to delete meetings about the NDAS and payments, but claimed he thought he was protecting legitimate privacy interests. His survival instincts had completely overridden any remaining loyalty to the mayor. The next morning, the newspaper's website crashed from traffic as the first article went live with the headline about the mayor's secret daughter. The piece was carefully written, sticking to facts with the DNA evidence, NDA documentation, and most damaging of all, the body cam footage of Sawyer's latest drunk driving incident. The article didn't need sensational language because the evidence spoke for itself, showing a pattern of lies, cover-ups, and special treatment that went back years. By noon, the website was back up with mirror servers handling the traffic, and protesters started gathering outside City Hall, holding signs with my brother's picture on them. Hudson made coffee while I watched the crowd grow from his apartment window, their chants getting louder as more people joined, carrying homemade signs demanding justice. The mayor's office released a statement saying he was canceling all public events to focus on family matters, but everyone knew he was hiding from the angry crowds. Sebastian called me that afternoon to say the district attorney's office was getting bombarded with calls demanding action, and he'd been given approval to move forward with a grand jury investigation into obstruction of justice and official misconduct. He couldn't name the mayor directly yet, but made it clear everyone understood who the real target was when he mentioned investigating evidence handling in high-profile cases. 2 days later, Jade's mother sent me a photo of the protective order she'd gotten from family court, establishing strict rules if the mayor wanted any contact with his daughter. The judge had granted supervised visits only with a court-appointed monitor present and mandatory counseling before any visits could begin. She'd taken control of the situation completely, making sure Jade stayed safe while the legal battles played out around them. That same week, a process server showed up at Hudson's door with a thick stack of papers naming me and the newspaper as defendants in a defamation lawsuit seeking millions in damages. Hudson helped me read through the legal jargon while my hands shook, understanding this was meant to drain our resources and scare us into silence, even though we knew the truth was our defense. The newspaper's lawyers said they'd handled the defense, but suggested I might want my own representation too, since our interests might not always align. I spent the next 3 days calling lawyers who all wanted huge retainers I couldn't afford, until Hudson suggested starting a legal defense fund online. Within hours of posting the fundraising page, small donations started coming in from strangers who'd read the article and believed in the fight for justice. $5 here, $20 there, each one with messages of support that made me realize how many people had been waiting for someone to stand up to the mayor's corruption. The fund grew slowly but steadily, enough to hire a lawyer who agreed to work for a reduced rate because she believed in the case. Meanwhile, Sterling's resignation letter somehow ended up on every local news site, including his mentions of ethical concerns and his inability to continue serving an administration that had lost its moral compass. He claimed hackers had stolen the letter from his personal email, but nobody believed him, especially when tech experts pointed out the metadata showed it was sent from his own computer. His attempt to control his exit story had blown up in his face, making him look even more guilty of being part of the corruption. 3 weeks after the grand jury convened, subpoenas went out to a dozen police supervisors and members of the mayor's legal team, requiring them to testify about evidence handling procedures. The legal process would take months, but seeing official court documents demanding answers felt like progress after so long being ignored. I spent days preparing my own testimony with my lawyer, going over every detail of what I'd discovered and making sure I had documentation for everything I claimed. During this time, Sawyer missed 3 mandatory alcohol counseling sessions that were part of his probation, telling his probation officer he was too stressed to attend. The judge didn't care about his excuses and ordered him to serve 30 days in county jail for violating the terms of his community service sentence. Watching him get handcuffed in court while his father's lawyers stood there powerless to help felt strange, not satisfying but just sad at the waste of it all. My new lawyer said our best chance at getting the full truth about my brother's death was filing a civil wrongful death suit that would force discovery of all the evidence from the original case. The paperwork took weeks to prepare, listing every person and agency we wanted documents from, every piece of evidence we knew existed but hadn't seen. Filing those papers at the courthouse felt like finally giving my brother the investigation he deserved, using the legal system properly instead of letting it be corrupted. The newspaper kept digging too, and published a follow-up story featuring anonymous testimony from the evidence clerk who'd handled materials in my brother's case. She described supervisors showing unusual interest in the chain of custody, asking her to expedite certain tests while delaying others, creating gaps that the defense lawyers later exploited. Her testimony matched perfectly with the timeline I'd built, showing how evidence got muddled at crucial moments during the trial. More people started coming forward with their own stories of the mayor's interference in legal matters, each one adding another piece to the pattern of corruption. A retired detective reached out saying he'd been pressured to drop an investigation into one of Sawyer's earlier incidents. A former city attorney admitted being told to settle cases quietly when they involved certain families. The dam was breaking as people felt safe enough to speak up, knowing they weren't alone anymore. The protests outside City Hall continued growing, with vigils every evening at the crosswalk where my brother died, people leaving flowers and signs demanding real justice, not the fake version money could buy. 2 weeks after the protests started getting bigger, Mayor Dorsey called another press conference, but this time he looked older and tired standing at that same podium. He read from prepared notes saying he wouldn't run for re-election next year, so he could focus on family matters and personal reflection about recent events. The reporters kept pushing for more details, but he just repeated the same vague statements about needing time to heal and reconnect with what really mattered in life. Behind him, his lawyers stood ready to jump in if he said anything that could hurt him legally, but he stuck to the script perfectly. The whole thing lasted maybe 10 minutes before he walked off without taking questions, while cameras clicked and people shouted after him. That same afternoon, Ariana called me to say she'd finished putting together a safety plan for Jade and her mother that included regular check-ins and connections to local support services. She'd found them stable childcare through a nonprofit program and set up counseling appointments for both of them to help process everything that had happened. The paperwork showed Jade would have access to therapy when she got older to understand her complicated family situation in a healthy way. Ariana made sure everything focused on what was best for the kid, instead of the drama around her parents. 3 days later, Sebastian met me at a coffee shop near the courthouse to explain what would happen next with the grand jury investigation. He said they'd keep working through all the evidence for probably another 4 or 5 months before making any charging decisions about the corruption stuff. The legal system moved slow, but at least it was moving now with real investigators looking at real evidence instead of just covering things up. He couldn't promise anything specific, but said the grand jury was taking it seriously and following every lead they got. The next morning, I drove out to the crosswalk where my brother died to record my statement for the civil case deposition. My lawyer set up a camera while I stood there talking about finding him that night and everything that happened after with the botched investigation and cover-ups. Saying his name out loud for the legal record felt like keeping a promise I'd made at his funeral about getting him justice somehow. The grief was still there heavy in my chest, but now it had direction and purpose instead of just eating me up inside. A week later, I met Jade's mother at a park while her daughter played on the swings like any normal kid would. We sat on a bench watching her run around and talked about practical stuff like the safety plan and upcoming court dates without pretending we were friends or anything. She thanked me for respecting her choices and not trying to control her story or use her for my own revenge plans. We were connected by all this trauma, but trying to build something better from it for both our families. That weekend, I rented a small room at the community center and put up flyers for a support group for families dealing with drunk driving deaths and corruption in the legal system. Only 5 people showed up to that first meeting, but we sat in a circle and shared our stories, and it felt like a start of something real. My brother's death would mean more than just our family's grief if we could help other people going through the same thing. 6 months passed, and I was working at a nonprofit that helped crime victims navigate the legal system while my lawsuit kept moving through discovery and depositions. Life had found a new rhythm, even with all the ongoing legal battles and court dates and lawyer meetings. Hudson had introduced me to someone from his gym, and we'd been dating for a couple months, which felt weird, but good to have something normal happening. The lawsuit discovery process kept turning up more evidence about how the original investigation got sabotaged, and my lawyer said we had a strong case. Then one morning, my lawyer called to say the mayor's team wanted to settle the civil suit without admitting guilt, but for enough money to fund our advocacy work for years. The settlement papers showed Sawyer would serve weekends in county jail for 6 months and complete a real treatment program this time with actual consequences if he screwed up. It wasn't perfect justice, but it was something real that would help other families and make sure my brother's death changed things instead of just being another tragedy people forgot about. Thanks for wandering through all of this with me. It's been really interesting sharing these moments together. I'll catch you next time. Subscribe for more content like this.